So, in assessing the international crime element of the Hamas and Israel war, we can bring about some clarifications and extract some depth of truth and fact to guide us in persecuting and also sanctioning against Israel and any state or body that defies international treaties, such as the Geneva Convention, the international human rights laws of the Rome Statute, the ICC. And the elements that we're going to explore in the background are including the proportionality aspect, intent as well, and the elements of crimes that are included in the Rome Statute and other bodies, and also the historical context that implicates whether Hamas was acting in self-defense or not. And if Hamas was acting in self-defense, then that implicates Israel's right to act in self-defense accordingly under international law. So, according to a report by the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry, there are reasonable grounds to conclude in 2022 and that the occupation of the Palestinian territory was now unlawful and under international law due to its permanence and the Israeli government de facto annexation policies. And so this report from the commission outlines that actually there was a need for Israel to act in self-defense when Hamas initially is acting in self-defense. And the report states that under international law, the occupation of territory in wartime is a temporary situation and does not deprive the occupied power of its sovereignty. So this refers to the occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory. And then we move on from the self-defense aspect to proportionality. And we're looking again the proportionate response to certain actions, which is not simply a comparison of numbers, but it is a exercise into the need for a state to act in a certain way. And so this can be defined by this explicit destruction of civilian property and of infrastructure and the destruction of civilian livelihoods. And when this is excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated for Israel, then under international law is a proportionality aspect. It is exceeded. And so this principle requires that the expected incidental harm is not excessive in relation to the anticipated military advantage. And the way that international courts and tribunals can assess that is to look at the military plans from Israel. And so we would need explicit access to those documents and then also their justification for those actions and war plans. And so it is a general principle of international humanitarian law. And now going into intent, which is a backbone of war crimes and any crime. It supports the practical elements of the crime, which can be defined as the actions or actus rea of international crime. And to assess this, I'm going to look at the Rome Statute of 1998. And when I'm looking at the elements of most of the war crimes and crimes against humanity under the Rome Statute, I find that the elements outlined, they pertain to a direct relation of these crimes being committed by Israel currently in the Gaza Strip. And some of these are listed here. There are Article 6, 7, and 8. I think most of Article 6 and then Article 7, Crimes Against Humanity, up until 7(1)(d), and then onwards. And in general, the elements that are listed under each of these crimes are that the perpetrator had perpetrated this action against one or more people, and that such person or persons belonged to a particular national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, and that the perpetrator intended to destroy in whole or in part that national, ethnical, religious, or racial group as such, and that number 4, the conduct took place in the context of a manifest pattern. So these 4 elements refer to all of these crimes that are listed in the Rome Statute. They are changed a little bit to reflect the specific crime that they're referring to. And perpetrator does not mean neutral or guilty or innocent. It just means it applies to everyone criminally responsible that might fall under any international human rights statute. Intent can be measured by the likelihood of an event occurring. So besides international law, going into any crime, for somebody to be guilty, both the mens rea and the actus rea have to be present. And the mens rea refers to the intent of the person to bring out a specific goal and to act in accordance with that goal. And the mens rea is, the actus rea is the act to bring about that specific goal. And intending, the mens rea, it could also be in negligence as a means for that. In criminal law, that refers to failure to exercise reasonable care, which results in harm or injury to another person. And so in the Palestine context, the attack of hospitals or civilian infrastructure, including homes, would be a failure to exercise reasonable care in fishing out and destroying Hamas. So it's not Israel versus Palestine. It's Israel and Palestine versus international law. Is international law being broken? And by who? And if it is, then how can these 2 parties fix it? Investigation, the question for Israel, or whether, and this requires the courts to have access to the military plan. So in conclusion, it's actually really good to summarize that the elements of crime and whether they have been fulfilled, and the element of proportionality and intent are also fulfilled. Is the way to do it is to assess and analyze the military objectives and how they're chosen in Israel, and access to standards for how individual status is determined by the Israel state. And so this is in the course of legal investigation, the question for Israel, or whether, and this requires the courts to have access to the military plan.